Hey there, aspiring horror authors. It's another episode of Sako and the Moon, created by two self-published horror authors. Booktuber and author Sandy Lender is celebrated for her contributions to fantasy, with her Choices series being a notable example of her ability to master multiple genres. Let's get to know this amazing author and pick her brain while we're at it. I am Sako Toomey, artist and author and a bunch of other things, but we'll just mention that I'm self-published 3 times over, with 2 more coming down the chute. I've been working on my craft for decades, and now I'd like to share my skills with you guys.
And I'm me. I am Dewan Elhern, more affectionately known as the Moon, the doer of things. I do things. I write stuff. I, film stuff, and I talk to people.
Yay! Yeah, we do those things.
We do those things.
And today,
we are here. This side. And here we have, I think Steven Zimmer said it best. She is Sandy Lender, the genre blender. Hello, Sandy. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I can't do a Star Chamber level introduction. There's something that Steven Zimmer does when he introduces. We've all been guests on Star Chamber at some point, and he does incredible introductions, and I can't do that.
Yeah, I don't know. He's got a cheat sheet or something, a template that he comes up with, that he introduces people. He makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to step up my game for this.
Yeah, I've been a guest on that show, and I've sat back like, ooh, I want to hear about me. I sound interesting. Who's this guy?
Yeah.
He should be the guest on the show, not me. Oh, wait, that is me.
It is me. Yeah. Okay, I have some questions that I'd like to, kind of start the conversation with. Can you tell the audience what it means to be an author who also booktubes?
Oh, wow. I probably can. Let me think about it. No, it is weird. I'll say that. It is kind of strange to be in both realms, because when I'm reviewing a book for Booktube, I'm reading that thing and thinking about, okay, how is the audience going to react to this? And how did the author think about it? Right? Because I'm coming at it from an author's point of view also. So when I'm bringing the book review to my audience on Booktube, I'm thinking about, okay, how can I phrase this so that the audience understands, okay, here's what the author was probably intending. Here's something that the author was probably trying to get across. I'm trying to show the audience, okay, not just a review of a book, not just a review of characters and plot synopsis, that sort of thing. I'm also trying to show, okay, the author was probably trying to do this too. And I don't know, I have a great deal of sympathy for the author, we might say, because I'm in that sphere also. But it's kind of weird. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, because I have heard so many other reviewers say that authors are not welcome in the review space. I mean, I've been told to my face that I'm not welcome in the review space. And it's unsettling, because, hey, I'm also a reader. I have a degree in English. I've read a lot of books. I've read a lot of classics. I've been in classrooms where a professor stood in front of me and talked to me about character arcs and plot points and synopsis and that sort of thing. So I do understand how to review a book. So I do have something to bring to the review sphere. So it's uncomfortable when I hear someone say to me, you need to get out of review spaces because you're an author. I don't like that. I think I can bring another element to the review space. And I think I'm very fair when I give a review. I think I'm very fair. If I don't like all the aspects of a book, I can still talk about the aspects I do like, and I can discuss all these different elements with my audience. I think I can be very fair.
I think you are very fair. Absolutely.
I agree. I'm a little biased because you did review my book at one point,
Yes.
and you were very kind, very generous in your review. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. I remember reading that. I remember reading it, and each of the stories that you had in there, each one of them had some extra element that I appreciate. There was one that, and you have to forgive me because it's been a while since I read it, but one of the stories had a lady who was waking up in just this nightmarish situation, and I was so unsettled by it. I mean, it got under my skin. You did a great job. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
But I was just saying, like, I do think that you're very fair. You were very fair in the way you review not just my book, but others that that did have elements that you weren't too kind, like you weren't too fond of.
Yeah.
You were still very positive.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm totally off center. I'm looking at you two on my screen, and I can see myself next to you, and it looks like I'm like cut off. Can you guys see me? Oh,
yeah, we can see you.
Go. Now you can see me. I just feel like I was totally like off center or something. Like,
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
Oh,
all right.
Live streaming.
Yeah.
Yay. How do you craft suspense and tension in your writing? Are there any specific techniques that you use to build fear?
Yes, the pacing, especially. I mean, the pacing is so important, because you have to have that flow of motion where something is moving quickly and then maybe draw something out a little bit, make something take a little bit longer so that the reader is getting tense, so it's building tension for the reader. But I also, I like to put, the character that the reader has fallen in love with, you want to put that character in danger. You want, if that character is the one that, is about to, fall into a pit, if that's the one that the creepy shadow is coming up on, that's the one that's going to make your reader go, oh my gosh, that's when the suspense is going to come in. You want the character that your reader has fallen in love with to be the one in danger. And that's how I'm going to build the most suspense, I think, when I'm writing. But I've also, going back to those college days, when I learned that the masters of the genre, they put children and children and animals in danger, because we as humans, we want to help the innocent. We just, as human beings out here in the world, if we see a child in danger, we're going to jump in and help that child, right? If we see an innocent in danger, we're going to help them. It's human nature to want to do that. So when you're reading a story and a kid is in danger, you are instantly going to be concerned. That suspense and that tension is instantly happening. So like in Silver Bells, the prologue, I've got 2 teenage girls in danger, and you're instantly concerned for them.
Indeed. Are there any tropes you enjoy subverting or reinterpreting in this particular book?
Oh, in this book, I guess I like to subvert romance, romance in general. I'm not a huge fan of just romance in general, right? I like, if a romance book is coming into my life, I want it to have something else going on too. Like I want it to be a paranormal romance, or I want it to be like a grimdark romance. I want something else to be happening, not just a happy-go-lucky romance. I want something dark happening, right? So in this book, there is like a sprinkling, just a hint of a nice, happy little romance, but it's like under the surface and it's not a main plot point. It's just kind of there. So I kind of subvert the idea of, a mature couple having a romance in this book. That's why I like to think of it as like a Krampus movie on the Hallmark Channel, because that Hallmark Channel vibe wants to be there and wants to come to the surface, and I never let it.
Oh,
I never let it
wonderful.
come fully through. Yeah.
Can you share a bit about your creative process? Do you start with a setting or a character, or maybe you started with like a specific fear?
For this book was off the rails. I don't think this one really fit my creative process at all. But typically
Oh,
I start with a character, right? A character comes to me and just won't get out of my head and won't leave me alone until I sit down and write their story, or at least outline something for them. I mean, I have characters in my head right now who want their stories written down. And I have to just tell them, okay, this seat is for you. Take this seat right over here in my brain and wait your turn, because I'm working on several works right now. I've got works in progress all the time. So I have to tell these characters, okay, I'll get to you. Take a number. I'll get to you. Just please stop harassing me. And that's usually how it works. It's usually the character first. This one, Silver Bells, was different because I did it over the 3-day novel writing weekend. And I didn't have the luxury of really developing a whole lot of stuff for it. It's like I went to the characters who were sitting in those chairs and said, okay, you, Ivy, come here. Okay, you, John, come here. Let's go. You're up. Let's make this happen this weekend. And they were ready because they had their story they wanted me to tell. And I'm like, all right, let's go. So that's kind of how that worked.
That's so wonderful. So you develop your characters long before they're actually written into a plot.
They're mostly in my head before I put them into something. For like a novel writing weekend, for something like that, I will make a list of character names that I can pull from during that weekend. And I will tape it on the wall next to my writing area so that I've got it right next to me, so that during the weekend, I don't have to stop and think, okay, I need a name for, person B who's going to be walking through the door at this time. I've got these names I can pull from. But as I'm making up that list of names, they're coming from those chairs. Those characters are sitting there who've been, yapping at me for the past couple of months. Those names are coming from the people who are sitting in those chairs and who have been saying, okay, I like to ride horses, or some characters like, oh, I like to play with knives. Those kind of characters, I can go, okay, you, Bobby, you like to play with knives. Come here, I need you in this scene. I can use them that way.
So you have a cast that you pull from. That's really cool.
Yeah.
How do you balance character development with the need to maintain a sense of dread and unease?
Ooh. Well, the characters, I don't know, ask that again.
Okay. Balancing character development with your pacing, basically, with the dread, with your pacing and the way that you tell your dread and your uneasiness.
Okay. Well, I guess the main characters that I've introduced, like in the first 1 or 2 chapters, their development is happening throughout, right? They're going on an arc. They're developing through the whole thing, and we're learning little pieces about them. There's nuance to them happening all throughout. So even when I'm trying to develop, dread and put them in scary situations, I guess their development is still happening even when I'm slowing things down for them. I mean, their development doesn't really stop just because the pacing has slowed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean,
yes,
even like a
that's
secondary
really
character, like those 2 girls that I put in danger in that prologue to Silver Bells. Those 2 girls, one of them is important, and she maintains almost a main character focus throughout the story. Her sister doesn't. She's an extra, right? She's not a main character, but she does get some development as we go through, just not a ton. But I need her there, not to take on a major role, but she needed to be there for that suspense and dread at the beginning. And then she doesn't really play a huge role later. So I guess her dread and suspense happened early on, but then her development carried on throughout the book, just in a very small way. But then Lexi Stovall, she is the teenager who did need more development and did need to continue throughout the story. And even when we get to a suspenseful moment in the climax of the story, we've got suspense happening, we've got, dread happening, and her development, I don't want to give it away, but I mean, her development is powerful there at the end. She's awesome and great.
Of course. And the way I think about it is they've spent the book leveling up. And when they hit the climax of the story, they should be at the level where they, like, it could be a challenge. However, like, they should have the skill set to overcome the conflict. What has been the most challenging aspect of writing horror specifically, and how have you overcome it?
I think the most challenging aspect for me in writing horror is keeping myself from getting too gory with things. I personally, I don't dig too much gore. I like humor in my horror. I like when something unexpected happens, like when a gnome explodes. I like that. It makes me giggle. It makes me laugh. I like it. It's unexpected, and you go, "Oh my gosh, this just happened!" And it's funny, yet it's horrifying, right? I mean, there's some horror there and there's some gore there, but I don't like to overdo the goriness because I don't want the goriness to take away from the humor. I like having humor in there. I know there are films like Violent Night where the gore is humorous. Okay. I enjoyed that film very much. It was so over the top with the gore and the disgustingness and the craziness of it, right? I enjoyed that a lot, but that's not really my style. And when I'm writing something, I don't want that, the goriness and the bloodiness of it to overpower the humor and the story. I want the humor and the story and the development, the character development you were talking about, to come through more than a goriness or a shock. I don't want
Right.
that to be
You're
what.
not into it for the shock value. You'd
Right,
much
right.
rather like kind of build the intrigue and that draw out that dread. And
I wrote a book called Problems on Eldora Prime, and it is a young adult sci-fi fantasy. It's dragons in space. Okay. It's what it is, dragons in space. And in that book, I have a scene that is a jump scare. And I didn't realize it was a jump scare until I went back and reread it, and it scared me. I had that visceral reaction to it. I'm like, oh, interesting. Nice. Well, I had a reviewer say that the book was more horror than young adult. And I thought, well, that's an interesting take. And as I look back on that series, the 3 books that are in the series so far, that reviewer is absolutely right. There's a lot of horror in those 3 books so far. And I think that I have just inserted a lot of horror elements into inserted a lot of horror in my books, and without realizing it, right? Because I haven't gone full on gore fest with the things I've written. So I've been inserting that subtle horror and suspense throughout, just without going too bloody.
The way I think of it is I write a genre with horror undertones. Yeah. So that the conflicts and the reactions are going to be horror, but my setting, my descriptions and everything like that, it's going to vary between horror and urban fantasy, I guess.
Okay.
Supernatural, paranormal, whatchamahooset. So I take something that's already horrific and I try to make it mundane in a sense that the contrast and my goal is to make the audience commiserate with the monster, and it makes them look into themselves a little bit and maybe wonder, you know, are they monsters too?
Nice.
Was the bad guy really that bad?
Was the bad guy really such a bad guy?
Nice.
All right, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
What advice would you give to aspiring horror writers who are looking to break into the genre today?
Read other horror writers, definitely. And I would say read a variety of horror writers. I mean, not just, I mean, for myself, I want to write horror that is not too bloody gross, but I want to read a variety of horror writers. I mean, like read Blind Sight, and the author's name just left my brain. Oh, you guys, it's the science fiction horror story with the creepy vampires.
Yeah.
I'm so embarrassed that the author's name just left my brain. Well, we'll think of it later and put it in the box below, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Blind Sight, is it Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin? Okay,
Mhm.
some of those type different horror stories, not just Stephen King, not just the author who wrote Blind Sight, not just those, but different ones. Read lots of different horror stories. Michael Nost, I mean, his Mothman story, right? I mean, there are different horror writers that you can read, and you can see how they bring the horror to the table, and you can see how they're building the suspense, and you can see how they are, like what you just described, how they're showing, the mundane juxtaposed with this psychological idea of maybe the monster's not really so very bad, right?
Mhm.
I like that. If you can read those different sub genres within the genre, it'll just help you craft your own so much better.
Good advice.
Thank you.
Good
No,
advice.
but seriously, I would do that.
I, as a horror writer and horror filmmaker, I like to read and watch other things. I read mostly memoirs, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, I love a good memoir. To hear somebody else's story is always fascinating to me.
Okay.
And especially if they've gone through something, I think that helps, kind of like you guys say, like reading this and taking from here and recognizing the horror within. I mean, you can read a memoir of someone's life and hear about the tragedy or dark sides of something that they've gone through. And there's horror in everything.
Yeah.
Like you said, you kind of accidentally wrote a horror series and didn't even intend to, but like you said, you went back, it's like, yeah, this is kind of horror.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hand you over to our friend the Moon.
I was going to hold you right here. Right in my pocket. So you recently wrote Silver Bells, a Christmas horror story, and as someone whose birthday is in October, I try not to use the C word in the month of October much at all.
Right.
But for this, I think we're going to be okay. I'll allow myself to say the word Christmas.
Yes.
So you said you started writing this during a marathon, like a 72-hour marathon weekend. Is that correct? Labor Day weekend?
Right.
You've done a few of those kind of marathons. So I want to ask you kind of, what is it about marathon writing that you
say that again?
What is it about marathon writing that you enjoy so much?
Oh, the dopamine rush. Oh my word. You guys, at the end of a marathon writing experience, the rush is, I mean, I've never done drugs, but I would imagine that is what a drug high feels like. oh my God. Because when you're done with that story, it's this sense of, I did it. And it's especially at the end of 72 hours, because at the end of that 72 hours, you're exhausted because you've gotten 4 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep over that 72 hours, right? In like little naps. So you're exhausted. Your brain is tired. You're like shaking from all the caffeine that you've taken in over the weekend. Your body is just spent, but you have written a novel. And it's exhilarating. It's crazy. It's the best feeling in the world. The first time I did it, and you guys, I wrote this down because I can't do math. I can't do numbers. I am terrible with numbers.
Ditto.
I've always been terrible with numbers, but I had the beam chemo treatment back in 2010. And ever since, numbers are just crazy. I can't do them. So I wrote this down. That my first 3-day novel contest was in 2009. I went back and figured out 2009. And that's when I wrote Problems on Eldora Prime. I wrote that over that 3-day weekend. At the end of that weekend, I was exhilarated. I was so happy. I was exuberant. I could not go to sleep at the end because you start writing Friday at midnight or like Saturday morning at midnight 01. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You start writing and you just type and you type and you type and you type. And then Monday at midnight, you're supposed to stop. So you type until I've got the thing finished. I got it done. I had this novel. It was over 40,000 words and it was complete. It was a complete story. And I got it done by 11. And so I was finished and I was going to go to bed. And I remember laying in bed with this cheesy grin on my face. And I couldn't go to sleep because I was so excited about what I had accomplished.
You should celebrate. Yeah.
That is why I love marathon writing. Well, and you get a book done,
Yeah.
because then after that thing was done, I could then go back to it and add scenes and fix stuff and make it into something publishable. And Night Wolf Publishing then published it the following year. So in October of 2010, Problems on Eldora Prime was released. It had the wackiest cover. Oh, you guys, it did not look like a fantasy or science fiction or young adult novel. I was like, okay, but I was so happy that this book was published, right? So I didn't care.
For sure.
Yeah.
So prior to this one, you're known for writing fantasy, right? You're primarily a fantasy writer. We have Choices Meant for Gods, I think, behind you, and right next to Silver Bells. Yeah. What did you find, I guess, comparing, contrasting the writing in that style you're so familiar with to dipping your toes into more of this horror? I feel like now we've learned that you are more of a horror fan than I originally thought. That's my next question. But what was it that you drew from fantasy that helped you in horror?
Well, in fantasy, you do have, or at least I put into my fantasy, all kinds of creatures and all kinds of, I guess I could call them subplots, but in my fantasy works, I have good versus evil. And in evil, you're going to end up with some horror. I mean, you're going to end up with some horrible things that come in to try to overtake the hero or the heroine, right? The bad thing is coming in to get at the protagonist, and conflict, right? Conflict.
I love it.
So, when you have that horror element coming into the conflict in fantasy, it could be through, the dragon or some creature that I've made up, like an Adros demon, or in suburban and urban fantasy, like Sako was talking about, maybe she's got some werewolves, maybe she's got, a mayor of the city, maybe something evil like that is in there, right? I mean, there's some horror element in there. I can find horror in any fantasy situation and make that be like the bad thing that our protagonist must overcome, or sometimes has to work with.
Ooh.
Yeah. Sometimes.
So learning that you are more into horror than I originally thought, what is your favorite horror movie?
My favorite horror movie?
Movie,
Is
book,
that what
we'll
you
go with
asked?
it.
My favorite horror movie is Poltergeist. The original first
Mm.
Poltergeist from like, when was that even released? Was that in the
Like
late 70s?
1970s, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that I
What was it?
still, you guys, I still remember the scene of like the television and Carol Ann reaching out to that television and that hand coming out and hitting the wall. I read the book before I saw the movie. I remember reading the book, and I remember in that book, I don't remember who wrote it, you guys. I'm so bad.
I couldn't
I
tell
don't
you.
remember the name. But I remember in that book, there was a scene where the mom was trying to clean something, and the dog, whose name was Buzz E, the dog was playing a game of taking the rag that she was cleaning with and running with it. And the author did the most humorous thing with hyphenating the game that the dog had made up and was playing. I remember that to this day. And I read that in what, the late 70s? So I was like not 10 years old yet when I read that book, if that was the late 70s when I read it.
Maybe around about that time, yeah.
Okay. Hopefully my parents didn't let me read it when I was that young. Hopefully I was reading the book in the early 80s. I don't know, but it's been a while. Okay. But I remember the author putting that device in there. And I loved that device. I loved the way that was written. I'm like, oh, I'm going to include that in one of my books.
Yeah, I love that too.
You mentioned describing Silver Bells as a Krampus story on the Hallmark Channel.
Yeah.
And you recently did on your Booktube channel, you know, Sandy Says Read. Do you have your little hashtag?
I have some. Yeah, I did. Yep. Sandy Says Read. Yeah.
That cracks me up every time I see it. I love it. Thank you for that. That was for me. You read the first chapter on your channel, and I remember watching that and having read through it. I'm just like, I don't know where the horror is going to pop in on this one.
Yeah.
You have your character Ivy. She's in a shop and she's buying wine, and she runs into the cute guy. And I'm like, I've seen this this Hallmark movie 1,000 times.
Yeah. Right.
I think Hallmark's doing Christmas now.
Probably. It probably started. Yeah.
So, what is the horror element that pops into Silver Bells? Without giving anything away, what is the element that we're dealing with? Is it werewolves? Is it a horrible dragon that magically appears in this snow-built town or whatever?
No, I didn't get to put dragons in it. No, but there is. It's a wolf bear-like creature that the spirit of the land has infiltrated. The spirit of the land that they have built on, that this town has been built on, the spirit of the land is using this. Basically, it's like a wolf pack. Okay, a pack of wolves. It's using these wolves to harm the people who have gotten onto his land. Okay, and it basically in chapter 2 we meet one of them. We see one of them. One of them bounds across the road as Ivy is driving to her friend's house. So we have the meet cute in chapter 1, which is a false flag. It's a red herring because that meet cute doesn't go very far in this book. I don't let them actually have their Hallmark movie, you know, they don't get the Hallmark movie fabulousness in this book. It just doesn't. It's not a romance novel, right? It's a horror story. So that romance is just kind of under the surface there. But in chapter 2, we don't have a meet cute. We have a, meet the horror element. We have the scary thing happen in chapter 2.
The near-death experience while she's driving and the thing crosses the street.
Right.
She's just like, I think this is a dog. We're just going to say it's a dog.
She hopes it's a dog. Yeah. And it goes there. The prologue, I know so many folks skip prologues when they read books, but I could not put the fire that Lexi and Lizzie are dealing with in chapter 1 because I did not want my reader to to imprint on Lexi as the main character, because Ivy's the main character. And I didn't want the reader to think Lexi was. And Lexi is a teenager. And I didn't want the reader to think this is a young adult novel. It's not. It's an adult novel. And so there were so many reasons that I needed that fire to happen. And I needed the reader to understand, okay, there's been a fire, and notice that there's stuff in the woods watching the fire. I needed that element. I needed that to happen. So I was like, you know what? We're putting in a prologue, putting the prologue in the front. There you have it. That stuff is going in the prologue. And then we'll start with chapter 1. And if people skip the prologue, you know,
it's their loss.
Yeah. Those elements get fed to them later, but you miss a lot if you miss the prologue.
So here's the thing, just to tell people, like, so there is a foreword, an introduction, and a prologue in the beginning of your book.
Yeah.
If it's in the book, people read it. This is just my advice to you in TV land. You're not on TV, it's fine. YouTube land. If it's in the book, read it. It just might be a foreword, but there might be something valuable there. It might just be the introduction from the author talking to you, but it's there for a reason. Trust me when I tell you, and those two will agree, if it's between the cover, read it.
Yes.
Just trust me on this one. So we obviously can't give away major plot points of Silver Bells, but if we're going to pitch the book, what is the one thing that someone can look forward to in reading Silver Bells?
I think they can look forward to, having some, unsettling, scary moments, but it's also, it's a feel-good story. I mean, in the end, it's a feel-good, I'm ready for Christmas now horror story. I mean, it's got that horror to it, but there's so much of just little elements of Christmas sprinkled in there. And I know we're not supposed to talk about Christmas during October, but you guys, it's a Christmas setting. She's there for Christmas to help her best friend get through some stuff. Ivy is there to celebrate Christmas with her BFF. She just happens to run into some supernatural crap,
It just happens to happen.
Yeah.
The wood chipper, as it were.
Yeah. Wood chippers and chainsaws.
I'll say this. Go ahead and get the book. You can get it now on Amazon. It's out there. Go ahead and get it. Read it out and around Halloween, so that when you're done, it's November, and you can go do your Christmassy stuff when you're done. That would be my suggestion. But of course, we all know each other from conventions. One in particular. You do other events and other book events and other conventions. Let's talk about that just briefly. What is it that you gain as an author from attending these types of conventions?
I think it depends on the convention, what I'm getting out of it. I mean, like you mentioned, there's one convention in particular that we all have attended, and that's Imaginarium. And not sponsored. When
they might as well be at this point.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah.
Right.
When I'm at Imaginarium, what I'm getting out of that is twofold. I'm getting the family experience. I mean, you know what it's like. I mean, when you're there, there's just this creative tsunami, right? It's everyone working together, talking together, coming up with ideas together, learning from one another. And that's the other thing that I'm getting. I'm learning stuff. When I'm at Imaginarium, the ideas that flow back and forth, I learn something. Every year that I'm there, I learn something new, something different, some new trip. What am I trying to say? Blah, blah, blah. Some new tip or trick that I can use, whether it's in my writing, on my Booktube channel, in trying to get my paperwork done, like with my taxes and numbers. I mean, there's something that I can learn at Imaginarium that's going to help me. And when I do these other conventions, like there was a romance writers convention down here in Tampa. That one was not so much a learning experience as it was just, getting to, meet and network with other writers and with a publisher from up north, right? There there's been the Sunshine State Book Festival down here in Florida that's in Gainesville. That was an opportunity to meet with readers. There were a ton of readers who came to that event, and they were buying books. I mean, I sold a ton of books off my table at that event. But the two authors who were on either side of me at that event, we also did some good networking, and I bought books from them. They bought books from me, and I'm going to be reviewing their books on my channel. So any of these events that I go to, I'm networking with other authors, and I'm buying their books to read and review on my channel. So I'm always after content for my channel too. So I'm getting stuff like that out of these different events.
Yeah, like, and this is my opportunity to say it to you yet one more time. We were just at Imaginarium this past July. You did not make it, and we don't have to go into all that, 'cause I know how draining that was for you. But there was a void. You talk about that family sense. There was a void, and one of the questions that I kept getting was, "Where's Sandy?" And we can tell that Sandy's not here. So there is that family element in it. And to just go one further, the forward to Silver Bells is another Imaginarium's mainstay, Steven Shrewsbury. Shout out to Shrewsbury, the wrestling fan. And he did the forward to your book. And so these are the types of networking things that you're talking about, where it's like, hey, I have a book. Can you read this? Hey, can I talk to your editor? Because I think it was Lamar.
Yeah, Jeff Lamar. I reached out to him and said, "Hey, will you connect me with your editor?" He said, "Sure." Yep.
And it's like, that's where the networking comes in, because a lot of the audience for our show are those who are trying to write, those who are trying to publish, those who need a nap, and those who enjoy horror.
Yeah.
And that's one of the important things that we always talk about, like when Sako goes to like her 45th convention of the year, and it's like, just go out, meet other people who are doing the things. I mean, me and Sako both write horror, but you write fantasy. We're all still connected. We all learn from each other. And this is just a really good space. And this is one of the reasons why we love to do this show. We talk about how we met at a convention, and that's how the show even happened. And is there anything else you'd like to just share with the Sako and the Moon peoples? I mean, not so much advice, but just generalness that you want to share.
I would say if your audience is the folks who are, still trying to, get that thing written, still trying to finish up that work that they're working on. I've been there, back when I was doing Choices Meant for Gods back in the early 2000s. I was trying to finish that thing off. And I mean, what I would say, just keep plugging away at it. And if you're watching programs like this and getting inspiration from programs like this, keep doing that. I mean, if there are things that inspire you, keep doing those things that inspire you. But if you can get into a thing like a writing marathon, if you can join a group of writers, a group of what am I trying to think of? A writing critique group. Yeah, like a writing club or a group of writers in your area. If you can get into something like that, where people can inspire and motivate and encourage you, try to do that. If it's online, if it's in person at a coffee shop, try to do something like that to help you and keep you motivated and keep you going. Because like I said, at the end of that marathon, when you finish that thing, there's no better feeling in the world than when you type "the end" and you've wrapped up your story. You've got those characters done. You've got their story told. When you get done with that work in progress, it's going to feel amazing. So yeah, just keep going.
Yeah, because you are both, you've independently published, you've traditionally published, you have series over here, series over there, you touch this topic and that topic. So I only mention that so that, the people who are watching our show, the people at home, are not feeling the need to feel like pigeonholed into a genre. Like you can be Sandy Linder, the genre blender, where you take elements from here, there, and everywhere, and just do your own thing. And if anyone ever tells you that you don't belong in this space or that space, or you should do this and that, Sandy's a wonderful example to tell them to go do something mean to themselves.
Go pound sand. Yeah,
Right.
you can, you guys. Well, yeah, like we said at the very beginning of this, with the booktube thing, I've had people tell me that I shouldn't be in review spaces because I'm an author. Well, that's crap.
That's
That's
BS.
crap. Yeah,
That's
that's
BS.
yeah.
We welcome you in Booktube, and
Thank you.
as a reviewer, I think your videos are very entertaining. They're
Thank you.
very you drag so many different elements. You try so hard not to spoil a book. Sometimes you try so hard, and then it's just like, you guys. And I wish I had the bingo card. Like the moment you said you guys, I wish I had the bingo card.
Yeah, I've got the bingo card right here, so people can see.
Oh.
All that is you guys on here?
I don't
Oh
know,
my
is
gosh,
it?
it is. You guys get it. Oh my gosh, yeah. Not that I'm predictable.
No, it's not predictable. It's just like it's the thing about it's you. And that's what I've always loved about your channel, and one of the reasons why we wanted you on this show, especially since you
Thank
wrote a
you.
horror book. Like the moment it came out that you were writing a horror book, I messaged Sako. I'm just like, we're getting Linder. But she was like,
funny.
I don't know if does she do horror? And I'm just like, I don't know, but she does publishing stuff. She's like an editor in her day job. I think we can get her on. We can find something to talk to her about.
It wasn't until you said that Silver Bells was coming out. And then I was like, we can promote that. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just
yeah.
like, we're getting Linder. It's okay.
I grabbed some of my marathon stuff in case we talked about it. And I wrote this one, Return to the Tribe and Fire. I don't know if you can see that. This is a zombie horror book that I wrote over the Right Fighters 3-day novella contest weekend I wrote it down, in 2020. It tied for second place, and that's why it got published, because it was one of the books that placed. And so they published it, and it's short. It's only 13,000 words, but it's a horror also. And that's, you guys, when I was preparing for this, I'm like, oh my God, I write a lot of horror. And it hadn't dawned on me. It hadn't made that impression on me yet that, yeah, I put a lot of horror into the stuff I write. Who knew?
Yeah, because I've never heard you described as a horror author. I never knew about your zombie book. I've never heard it. And so I'm just like, oh, Sandy Linder's a horror. Give me more. Give me more. Horror.
Yeah. Well, I don't put too much gore into it. And so many folks out there associate horror with goriness. And it doesn't have to be gory. It doesn't. I mean, horror can be the suspense and the tension and the psychological element of horror, right? It doesn't have to be gory gross. And I think that because I don't write the gory gross, I've never promoted my stuff as horror. I mean, even the zombie horror novel, I've never really promoted it as a horror novel. I talk about it as a zombie apocalypse type thing, right?
Dystopian.
Zombie dystopian.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was there some more marathon stuff that you wanted to mention? Because like we got the time.
We got the time. No, that's kind of
notes?
Yeah, that's kind of it. I don't. You guys know, I always feel weird when I'm talking about my own stuff. I like to talk about everybody else's stuff. Right? I like to talk about what other authors are doing, what other authors have, and what other authors have done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're no different. Like I said, we've all been on Star Chamber. Shout out to our friends at 7-Star Press and Imaginarium. We love you, Holly and Steven. We've all been on Star Chamber, and I can hear the awkward. I know the awkwardness when I'm talking about me on Star Chamber, and I've heard the same thing out of Sako and you. It's just like, oh, here's my book. I mean, here,
yeah,
take it. I don't know what to say about it. Let's talk about something else. But you do so much stuff, and you're such an asset to the author space in general. You're such a wonderful person. We always love talking to you. I love seeing you at Imaginarium. Everyone there missed you this past year, so we will see you in 25.
Yep. Come hell or high water. Well, what I need to do is this year, what I did is I thought I was being so clever by booking airfare to come up there instead of relying on my car. Because, I've got a pretty crappy car. And I thought, well, I'll rather than, risking my travel on my weird little car, I will buy airfare and I will get there that way. And then the Cloud Strike or Crowd Strike, whatever that thing was.
Cloud Strike, I think it was.
Yeah. Okay. It affected
everything.
Almost every single airline and, the banks and some other crap. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't hear about it until that morning.
Yeah. That morning. Yeah. I didn't get the text message until I was at the airport. It's like an hour from here to get to the airport. So I'm at the airport and I'm in the parking garage going, oh, well, this is a problem. Okay. So I went on into the American Airlines check-in counter because I had some miles I could use. I had used my miles on American Airlines to get to Imaginarium. And then I was flying another airline to get back home because that was the cheapest way to do it. Mm-hmm. No, American Airlines, the best they could do to get me to Louisville was going to get me there at like midnight that night. So I was going to miss 3 of the events I was signed up for. I was given a workshop. I was on a couple panels. I was going to miss those. And then they'd get me there at midnight. And I had like a first panel in the morning was like at 9. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be dragging for that. Like, you know what? There is no point. There's no point in me doing this. I texted Holly and I'm like, I am so sorry. I'm going to miss today no matter what I do. There is no point. I'm just calling it. I drove back home. I was so depressed that whole weekend. I was like, this sucks. Everything about this sucks. I was so
depressed. It's true. Because I messaged her and then there's a video like this record of her frustration from this. But that's I just want to always highlight, like, there's so much that you do. There are so many different places where people can see you and they can get all of your books either through your website or there's some on Amazon. But most importantly, they can find you on YouTube at Sandy Says Read. And you do all kinds of book reviews. You do interviews. Do you have anything coming up? I know you recently talked about a book. I can't remember the title. But it was the one with the one-legged crow or one-legged raven.
Oh, yeah. Dreams of Desolation. That was by Miguel Garcia. Can't believe I remembered. But my brain is so fast, I can't believe I remember. But he's an author that I met at the Sunshine State Book Festival back in January. And I saw his book sitting on his table. And I'm like, I am drawn to this cover. I want to see more about this. And when I read the back cover, I'm like, okay, this will be perfect for October content on my channel. I'm going to purchase this book from you. So I got that done for October. I wanted to have that for spooky Halloween season. I wanted to have that one. Yeah. So that is up on the channel now.
Yes, it is. That's how I knew that because I watched it.
Oh,
so
okay.
after all of you people like this video, because you want to, it's right there. The button, like right there. You hit the button, the like button there. And then you should subscribe to it because that button's like over here somewhere. And then ring the notification bell because, we did this show at 5. We normally do our show at 2. But if you don't want to make sure, you don't miss an episode, you're going to ring that little bell thingy that's like there. It's right there. And then when you're done liking and subscribing all the art stuff, you go to Sandy Says Read. You're going to subscribe to her channel, have all your friends subscribe to her channel, and use the hashtag Sandy Says Read.
There you go.
Sandy Says Read. Yay. Right. Okay, well, I guess we're wrapping up. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a good conversation.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Super fun. Next week, we are going to be talking about psychological horror, from gaslighting to mind games. And then last week, we talked about technology in modern horror stories. So I will put links in the cards and things. Maybe even an end screen. Heck, I don't know.
That's YouTube stuff.
Well, you guys have got a really cool intro. I mean, you guys have got it going on. I like that. Sitting there watching the intro happen, I'm like, I feel I better up my game.
That is all Sako. Sako
well,
is
I like it.
the producer of this, and she's like directing this, and she gives most of the topics. It's literally, listen, this is life. This is how the show works. Like, Sako does the work, and she's like, Dwan, be here, and I show up and I say things.
Dwan, yeah. I basically set the table, and then
I show up to eat.
He shows up to eat, and
like,
or provides the food. You know, like
there are times where it's like we are in studio in the little green room bubble before we go live, and I have to like look at the little header in the corner and be like, oh, that's what we're talking about today. Okay, I can do that.
Nice. I'm gonna try and be better about that.
That's not on you. That's on me. I am more spontaneous. I'm better on my feet. I feel like if I try too hard to plan and plot, like I showed you before we got started my list of questions.
Yeah.
That was a blank page.
The tablet.
So I was just like, yeah, that's how we work.
It's how it works. All right. We will catch you guys on the flip side.
Thank you, everybody.